This morning, we have live team coverage for you from Plains to the Carter Center right here in Atlanta. But first, we take a look back on the life of our 39th president. Jimmy Carter took his final breath on Sunday, surrounded by family in Plains, Georgia, the town where he was born on October 1st, 1924. Carter was a loving husband to Rosalind for 77 years and a father of 4.
He was Georgia's governor from 1971 to 1975 after serving as a state senator. He became the 39th president in 1977, and by his side every step of the way, right, his closest confidant, Rosalind. She passed away last year, November 19th. She was 96 years old. In the White House, President Carter was able to mediate peace between two longtime enemies in the Middle East. But it's from the Carter Center in Atlanta where he launched some of his most significant achievements, waging peace, fighting diseases, and building hope. This morning, we look back on the incredible imprint he leaves on the world.
Although Plains, Georgia has made its mark as the birthplace and home of Jimmy Carter, the boy who grew up to become president actually spent his formative years in a place even smaller than Plains, 2 miles away in an unincorporated and predominantly black community called Archery.
During the dry season, when we were cultivating crops and planting and cultivating and harvesting, we were extremely busy in the field. And Daddy was a very good taskmaster. He taught me the benefits of hard work.
Daddy was Earl Carter, a larger-than-life farmer who successfully ran a country store in Archery and an agricultural warehouse in downtown Plains. Mama was Lillian Carter, a spirited woman who worked as a small-town nurse. When he graduated from Plains High School, Jimmy Carter went to a community college in nearby Americus, then Georgia Tech. But Earl Carter wanted his son to go to the Naval Academy, and 2 years later, Carter received a wartime appointment. It put Jimmy Carter in U.S. Navy submarines and sent him around the world. He would marry Rosalind Smith, a hometown girl who grew up just a few doors away from the Carter family. A few years later, Carter returned home and entered the world of politics. His first victory was a state Senate seat.
I was able to get a 4-year college approved in Americus, our county seat, and that got me reelected without any opposition. And then I decided to run for the U.S. Congress against a Republican incumbent, Bo Calloway, who was from West Point, and he was an antagonist of mine in many ways. He withdrew from the congressional race and left me with the congressional race won. I decided he wanted to run for governor. I decided to run for governor against Calloway, so I ran for governor in '66 and lost.
And against Lester Maddox.
And against Lester Maddox.
Lester Maddox was a fiery segregationist who didn't get enough votes to win the election, but became governor after the legislature stepped in. Carter went back to Plains and plotted to run for governor again. It was a race that shook the state in 1970. This time, he won.
I say to you quite frankly that the time for racial discrimination is over.
Carter's inauguration speech stunned his listeners, but that speech, as well as his 4 years as governor, gave him a reputation as a new kind of Southern politician.
People were looking for someone that was not from Washington.
Jay Hakes, another early key Carter supporter, was impressed immediately with Carter's command of detail on major issues. Hakes believes it was Carter's status as a Washington outsider and his faith-based ethics that resonated with most voters as he was running for president.
We now have a projected winner in the presidential election. NBC News projects James Earl Carter of the state of Georgia elected the next president of the United States.
When Jimmy Carter brought his good intentions into the White House,
I, Jimmy Carter, do solemnly swear that
he began with an ambitious agenda. President Carter attacked the energy crisis, fuel shortages, and rising prices. He created the Department of Energy. He told us we all must do our part.
All of us must learn to waste less energy.
This was the president who, in March of 1979, engineered the Middle East Peace Treaty, just 6 months after the preliminary agreements were first reached at Camp David, one of the greatest diplomatic achievements in U.S. history.
Carter's involvement was very, very necessary, and this brought peace between Egypt and Israel that has lasted to this day.
Jimmy passed more legislation than any president except Lyndon Johnson since the World War II. Good legislation. We're making friends in the world.
Most presidents, after they're done with office, you know, they're playing golf, they're on the lecture circuit sometimes, they serve on corporate boards. He made it a mission to continue what he thought was important to the world.
And what was important? First, fighting for justice.
The most enjoyable and exciting, challenging things are when we break down those barriers and reach out to others.
The Carter Center, since 1989, has worked with 38 countries to monitor and ensure fairness in nearly 100 democratic elections. On the other side of the planet, guinea worm disease has affected millions. Carter championed its removal, and in 3 decades, the number of cases dropped to dozens. The only other disease eradicated ever, smallpox. And with every cause, Carter aimed big. In 1976, a humble husband and wife in the humble city of Americus, Georgia, founded a humble nonprofit, Habitat for Humanity. The goal? To build houses for those in need. It remained humble until it courted a former president. His approach to Habitat reflected his outlook overall, affecting the world and never forgetting its roots. It is the strength of a global icon, the strength of a man from Plains, Georgia.
Really, his deep faith was the pillar of his life, and he said very late in his life, in his late 90s, I believe I will live again, and in that way, his family is celebrating that he's back with his wife in heaven.
And we had the same approach when we talked about Rosalind's passing. Just you sort of smile. You never typically smile and have such joy delivering news of a death, but with a life with so much history and legacy to be left behind, and knowing what future generations will learn about him in history books, it makes you smile. 100 years old. We also talked in the newsroom too about that big party that they were able to have recently at the Fox in October for his birthday. So what a beautiful life. So President Carter had 3 siblings, Billy, Ruth, and Gloria, who have all passed. Mr. Carter's parents were Earl and Lillian. Jimmy and Rosalind had 4 children, Donnell, Jack, James III, and Amy, as well as 12 grandchildren, including former gubernatorial candidate Jason Carter, and 13 great-grandchildren. 11 Alive, Zach Merchant begins our team coverage for you this morning from Plains as friends and family reflect on Carter's incredible life and legacy.
So Zach, it's really hard to imagine Plains without Mr. Carter, the neighbor everybody knew and everybody loved. What are you hearing from people there today?
Well, you guys make such a good point when you talk about this is sad news. It's sad news we've got to deliver, but you do almost have a little bit of a smile when you talk about Jimmy Carter, the Carter family, his 100 years of legacy here in Plains. It's so clear as soon as you get here, he is at the center, he is at the soul of this community, and while he may now be gone, that soul, that center, that foundation here, that is not going anywhere, and neither is his legacy, and it is a long one here. You can start here. There's, of course, his remarkable political career. It's an astonishing arc that took him from a state legislator to governor and then to the White House. There's, of course, also his humanitarian work with the Carter Center and the Habitat for Humanity, both cornerstones of the 39th president's legacy. But if you talk to his family, they often point to other more subtle things that stand out to them. And we've spoken with his grandson, Jason Carter, over the past few months. And back in September, I asked him what he has learned from his granddad, and his answer was all about family.
One of the great joys for me, not everybody gets to experience their grandfather until they're almost 50 years old. My children are 18 and 15. They have really long, deep memories of their great grandfather, right? Those personal relationships are real and impactful just in that way.
And it has been a long journey to get to this moment. We should be really clear. President Carter spent nearly 2 years in hospice care. Coming up at 5 o'clock, hear how that experience impacted him and his family. We're live in Plains this morning. Zach Merchant, 11 Alive News.
Zach, I love how you talk about the generations. We talk so much about his impact around the world, but his impact within the family, and that they have those deep memories. That's so significant as they go on to do whatever they feel led to do.
It so absolutely is, and there's the political side of things too. You mentioned Jason Carter, who we just heard from in that soundbite a moment ago. He served in the state senate, same position that his granddad, Jimmy Carter, served in before going on to the governorship and then to the White House. That's the political side of things, but there's so much else too, and faith is at such a cornerstone of all this, and we'll be unpacking all of that throughout the morning.
All right, Zach Merchant in Plains. Thanks so much, Zach. As part of the former president's state funeral, we do know his casket will travel to Atlanta from Plains, where he'll lie in repose at the Carter Center. Then he'll be flown to Washington, D.C. to lie in state at the U.S. Capitol. After his state funeral, he'll be taken back to Plains for a private service. Mr. Carter will be buried alongside Rosalind under their favorite willow tree on the property they shared for decades.
Liza Lucas continues our team coverage this morning live at the Carter Center, where Georgians have been showing up to pay their respects since learning of the former president's passing. Liza, so many are visiting, just really motivated by the life of a man who spent the majority of his own life serving others.
Exactly, Aisha, and good morning. It is that life of public service, a life built on faith, a man who led by example, as you mentioned, that is motivating people to reflect and remember on the great legacy of the former president, a legacy and a mark he left not only on Georgia, not only on the nation, but really across the world. We're talking about someone who started from an upbringing on a farm in Georgia, who rose to become America's president, but Jimmy Carter, for many, continues to be defined by his later years, including work done right here at the Carter Center, which the couple established in 1982 in order to further goals of building lasting peace. Carter's work post-presidency focused on advancing human rights, promoting democracy, and preventing and eradicating disease. And it was during that last chapter he became a global icon in particular, and we spoke with former U.S. Ambassador Andrew Young about the impact former President Carter had on the world. Young saying that Carter and his wife Rosalind changed the world for the better.
I don't think of this as a sad time. I think of this as a triumphant time, that he was serving God and serving God's children here in Georgia, and he did not put any limits on the grace and mercy of God and the needs of God's children. And I think that great is his reward in heaven, and that he and Rosalind will be united.
Obviously, a beautiful love story that a lot of people also talk about right there. Young also mentioning that Carter never claimed to be perfect, but he always claimed to be guided by that inner voice inside, particularly when it came to leading the nation. And as many reflect and will continue to over the next week, we remember that legacy. Many people saying that he helped as many as he could for as long as he could. Here at the Carter Center, I'm Liza Lucas, sending it back to you.
Liza, thank you. It's always so great to hear the people who were alongside Mr. Carter for so many years. People like Ambassador Young always giving such personal perspective there. Our coverage of the life and legacy of former President Jimmy Carter continues right now on 11 Alive Plus. On the home screen of the app, you can also watch President Joe Biden and Ambassador Young's reflections on their relationships.